All right, hello everybody, and welcome to Conservatish episode 237. My name is Peter Feliciano. Wherever you're listening or watching, please subscribe, share this, rate it, review it. You can find me on Instagram at Peter_Feliciano. You can find me on TikTok at Peter_Feliciano, and you can find me on Twitter at Rule62Peter. And and you can support my music and my podcast at patreon.com/Conservatish. Ladies and gentlemen, Kevin Peters from New York Freedom Rally. Hello, hello.
What's going on?
Thank you so much for joining me, Kevin. This is a bit of an awkward video. Good Lord. Look at these gams.
This is a trial run.
This is definitely the
new
trial.
setup.
Yeah, this is the new setup. First time I've done an in-person recording since moving to... Wait, was that your water or my water?
I haven't touched either, so if that's
probably mine.
That's probably you.
Yeah, I don't want to give you herpes too. All right,
we all got it. We all got it. Just
I heard some shit about HPV.
Just like the C word, we all got it.
We all got it.
Or don't got it.
Well,
there's nothing to get.
There's nothing to get.
There's nothing to get.
Hey man, hey bro. Thank you so much for joining me, sir. Where can people find you and support you?
Well, New York Freedom Rally is in its current iteration is NY Freedom Rally on all platforms except for our website, which is still New York spelled out freedomrally.org.
Awesome. Okay, so first things first. My experience was, and I know I told you this, but my experience was I was in New York. I moved to New York. Signed my lease, and 2 days later, the city got shut down. I lost my job. We were all going to die, blah, 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 blah. I didn't know from the jump that it was some foul, creepy lizard stuff. You know what I mean? Like I thought like, okay, this is legit. You know, because here's the thing too that we always forget, and I've mentioned it on the show too before, but they were showing us videos from China of people falling in the streets and getting locked up and like fear-mongering like crazy at the very beginning of this. So why wouldn't we feel like, oh, this is insane. We're all going to die. This is not good. And I thought, okay, this is weird, but I was locked down in my apartment. I pivoted, I adapted like we all did, or most of us anyway. Some of us did not. But, okay, so eventually, after a little while, I saw that the pandemic was... it was being utilized in this weird way. It was being politicized. Like, obviously, and obviously I have a political show. I started this in August of 2018. I knew that it was going to be politicized, and I knew people were already ragging on Trump unnecessarily. I knew that there was some creepy stuff going on with the government not using the hospital boat that they were sending to us to, like, help in New York, blah, blah, blah. But for me, it really started to gain some creepiness when... the lockdowns, the masks, the whatever, but especially when they started coming out with the vaccine. And I had decided I was like maybe January, February, like, yeah, I'll get it, but, I'm young, so I'm not early on the list. I'm not going to be, whatever. And I kind of saw it like going to the DMV. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not super scared of this thing because I've done my research and I know I'm going to survive anyway, unless I have a bunch of comorbidities and blah, blah. So, you know what? I'm not tripping. I'll get it eventually. I'll see, whatever. And then they started ramping up the rhetoric. They started ramping up the propaganda. And immediately, because I've been a rebellious asshole for a long time in a good way, I smelled, what the fuck? You're going to buy me a donut? You're going to buy me a donut for getting a vaccine. Like, this is, what? There's some, it's sniffed of foulness. And that's when I started going, okay, what is, and I, paused a little bit. I had no appointment. I was like, whatever. But then around maybe April, May, I was like, I don't think I'm going to get this shit. Like, they're ramping up and then they really started June, July saying that if you're not getting it, you're the devil, you're racist, you're evil, you're whatever. And, I saw the mandates coming, and I'm like, this is insane. And that's why I want to say September of 2021, I went to a New York Freedom Rally. I don't know who shared it. I don't know what happened, but I saw it online, and I'm like, yep, that's where I'm going. And this, I'm telling you right now, I have never been, as political as I am on the show, as foul-mouthed and memes and all the stuff, I have never been to no rally. I don't do that. It's not my stilo. I don't want to be around a big group of people because mob mentality is real. And I don't want to be placing myself in a position where I could be hurt or have to deal with trying to save other people with riots, shooting, blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, this is something real, and I actually want to be a part of this. I actually want to be. So that New York Freedom Rally was my first ever, and I think it was down at City Hall at the south end of it. Or on the corner, and there was some cops around, whatever. But ultimately, it felt like it was such an uplifting experience. I went with, do you know Mike Harlow? Skinny little gay kid who's a friend of mine, outspoken, non-lizard activist, as he calls himself, a non-fluencer, and we went, and it was...
That needs to be a t-shirt, non-lizard.
Dude, that's really the ultimate... That's the ultimate shit. Anyway, so I just want to say I appreciate that I got to be a part of my first rally because it was something really important and because it was organized well and because, as soon as we showed up, bunch of black people, bunch of Jews, bunch of whites, bunch of women, bunch of gays, bunch of this, but it was every time, and even some Democrats, and even some, straight up, even some vaccinated people. It was still like, a mandate, no, and so I just want to first start off the conversation by thanking you for providing that space, and for being forward thinking and organizing.
That means a lot. Thank you, man. That's just hearing the backstory from your perspective. I think a lot of people have similar stories. Even a lot of us who had a leadership role in the development of this movement, this grassroots phenomenon. We had similar experiences. I know I kind of played along with the whole charade to a certain extent from the beginning. I had a pretty solid understanding about the pharmaceutical industry and how nefarious things could get. I don't think anyone could have imagined it playing out and continuing to play out just how it has and is.
Right.
But, I think it did kind of play out in a way that got entangled with the political events of 2020. And by the end of 2020, when a lot of us first met each other and we first were hitting the streets, there was stuff going on earlier in 2020, but there was definitely a large contingency within New York City who was outraged about the election and all the basically the gaslighting and the propaganda that was pitting the left against the right. As much as I hate to use these like one-dimensional terms, sure, but just for the sake of simplicity, there was a large contingency of people that were outraged and concerned about what was happening from November into January through the winter of 2020, 2021. And that was the same time that, I first of all need to shout out Cara Castronova, who was leading a lot of these early rallies, and also Eric, Jessica, and a lot of more like veteran figures in the freedom movement. Some of them were involved with Occupy Wall Street. Some of them go back to the 90s and the AIDS scam that had so many parallels. And, they knew firsthand from experience what Fauci was capable of. So you had the Liberty Coalition and this whole email and like this grassroots core group that was hitting Union Square every Sunday during that time. And, I wound up coming across one of these through word of mouth. I was religiously listening to Gary Knoll, who is a medical commentator. He's a holistic doctor who's spent decades in the Institute of Applied Biology, a major innovator in homeopathic medicine and natural healing, who does great work just keeping tabs on the latest from the peer-reviewed literature when it comes to nutritional health and also addressing a lot of the corruption and the fraud and what was happening from the pharma side But there were some groups through Facebook and online that I wound up hearing about these rallies, these small rallies on Sundays in Union Square.
What month was that?
For me, it was December 2020.
Okay.
And but just I'm kind of skipping ahead. Just for me personally, like I said, I kind of played along from the beginning. I would go around with my mask. I had to go to my grocery store. I consider myself a health nut, and I had to make sure I was getting my organic produce and my just like basic thing. There were some great stores. My neighborhood in Brooklyn. But they were complete Nazis about the mask, and eventually I reached a point where I don't want to spend my money here. I'm gonna go a little further down the block, maybe even pay more. They didn't have the best deals, but yeah. So by the end of 2020, I recognized that there was some momentum bubbling up. There were people that saw the writing on the wall, where things were going once the experimental product was being rolled out with barely any testing. The clinical trial was literally just in its infancy, and eventually we recognized that there needs to first of all be some real thought put into how do we reach people? How do we transcend the political divide? How do we navigate the whole, how do we avoid falling into these boxes that they're trying to pin us? They're trying to pin us down into these political boxes, and all these narratives that were just that were being really weaponized aggressively from the beginning, that it's all white supremacists, Trump, MAGA, and a lot of times back then in Union Square we had more counter protesters, BLM, Antifa, whoever, that as soon as they see one person with a MAGA hat, right? And this is the thing, in its early days, before anyone uttered the words New York Freedom Rally, it was this just like it was this evolving group of people that were meeting each other and trying to figure out what are we doing here? How are we gonna spread the truth about this agenda that goes back? People who were saying from the beginning about Agenda 21, about the World Economic Forum, about all these globalist, eugenicist, depopulation, transhumanist agendas that people are still in the dark about. Largely people don't understand. It's beyond their comprehension that this could have been in the works behind the scenes for so long. So anyway, we had, like I said, some people with the MAGA hat, total conservative, so-called right-wingers, and we had people like myself who, at that time I considered myself more of a progressive. I was kind of like, letting go of the more like
dichotomy.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was letting go of my more like socially progressive, liberal, ties to like what's now become. I still don't know how that, if you want to talk about the Democratic Party and what's become mainstream with the people like Bernie Sanders, AOC, and this radical. That's another conversation.
Yeah,
but there were, we can go there. But the progressive, like classical liberal, hippie mentality was strong. There was a strong presence of classic progressive liberals standing shoulder to shoulder with conservatives from the beginning, and this is the foundation that we when you talk about this rally in September of just over a year ago, it's the most incredible thing I've ever. I still don't know. It's hard to really imagine how this all happened, and it was beautiful, and I just really attribute it to the grace of God that like all these people came together, and I've made lifelong friends that I couldn't be more grateful for. But there have been also a lot of challenges, and we've learned a lot along the way.
Right.
So,
had you ever been a part of organizing something like this politically?
yeah. So I'm happy to go into my history because I think it's really emblematic of like everything. Again, it's about deconstructing all the stereotypes from both sides. People on the right are making these stereotypes about people like myself, who was completely gung-ho about the myth of democratic socialism back when Bernie Sanders was running in 2016. And this is what opened my eyes to just how deep the corruption goes when it comes to our elections. I was really excited about how unabashed Sanders was about the Federal Reserve and about addressing the corruption coming from Wall Street. And I wasn't really prepared back then to come to terms with all the lies surrounding the climate crisis and global warming, and the way that our weather is engineered, and that they're I like to say now that they're literally gaslighting people with like we just right this past week you're hearing about Gavin Newsom and now Kathy Hochul saying you can't have gas powered vehicles, you can charge up your car with coal-powered electricity. Oh, but we might just have to shut that off, just like they're doing in California. Like, if people don't see where this is going by now, then there's no hope for them. We have to just like figure out, okay, that we need to like shine a light on all these lies that go back to the Rockefeller times, and how like we can power our cars with water, and like all these alternatives that exist. That's this is the kind of stuff that we have to really talk about. Moving forward. But yeah, so I wasn't really aware about the Green New Deal and about Agenda 2030 back in 2016. But once Sanders just cowered like a
say bitch, you could say bitch,
like a complete sheepdog sellout.
There you go. Well done.
And like however many, and he's got the same. He's probably got the same number of mansions that Patrisse Cullors does from BLM. It's like they're raking in dough. I donated money that I didn't have. I couldn't afford to donate to that campaign, and he completely just like bends over and takes it. Once Clinton
and you blatantly didn't get the money
stole
back,
that. Oh hell no!
Nobody got the money.
When Clinton blatantly, I was there in Philadelphia in 2016
at the DNC?
at the convention, and I was meeting Bob Fitrakis, and like these guys from Columbia Free Press, all these people that were blowing the whistle and shining a light on the Diebold Premier ESNS, all the like servers and all the software, the machines that they were hooking up to Wi-Fi, hooking up to the internet when you go to vote. And so like we're seeing this firsthand from the Sanders campaign and that year, and we're going to turn around and say none of this happened in 2020. It's completely out of the question all of a sudden.
Most secure
in 2020
election
in
history.
So this is the thing. This is why I'm so like I feel bad that it took so long for me to like come out and address this from my perspective. I did not vote in 2020 because I had no faith that my vote would be counted from experience. But I went down to DC to see how these people. I basically went as an observer just to see. I think people were right to be upset and to want to hit the street and show up on the National Mall in November, December, and then obviously what happened on January 6th was just like a blatant that's the other thing. If you're not willing to admit how blatant of a setup that was, and that Trump was complicit in, by the way. Trump was totally complicit. And I mean, Okay, that maybe that's a stretch. People might
No,
might not agree with that.
You don't.
but
Yeah, you don't have to censor yourself on here.
yeah, no, but like whatever the case may be, it's like we know that I was there when they had the alarm going off the National Mall, the National Guard pulled up. Me and a couple friends of mine were outside, like we weren't trying to go inside. We were there
Right.
just observing everything that was going on. There were no police. What we did after the rally, we went to have lunch because we were starving. We got there early in the morning. And by the time we finished eating, we went to the Capitol. It was just a complete mob scene there.
Right.
All these Antifa and FBI agents were literally like riling. We can talk about Ray Epps. It was just, it's all out there in the open at this point. But this is important for everyone to understand, because now they're weaponized. They're still to this day weaponizing and gaslighting both sides.
Yes.
About what happened that day, and it's important. It's an important conversation to have now, because we have a really critical election coming up in November, and we got to get rid of these people like Hochul and Newsom.
Right.
But at the same time, from where we stand, like a lot of our, the people that we're working with, is to just take people out of this box where like we have to put all our faith in whoever's going to replace these tyrants on the left, the Democrat Party.
Right.
We have to understand that there's people on both sides that are serving the same master. Right. And they might not be trampling on, God willing, there's changes, and like people are more respectful of their oath to the Constitution. But in the long term, we're seeing that these
self-interest, company interest, lobbyists, like they owe. They got their job because they owe.
The same agenda is going to continue to be rolled out. Mark my words. Unless we step up and say that we're in charge here, and that we hold these people accountable in the long term, and we expose whatever ties they do have to these interests going all the way to the top. Right. From the banking and the international, we already know who they are. We already know who they are, and yeah.
And I like pointing out, that's part of the reason why I called the show Conservatish, because I don't like the dichotomy either. I don't like the idea that I'm, I go by that old Chris Rock bit, even though he definitely faked that thing with Will Smith.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway,
absolutely.
It was fake. Anyway, that old Chris Rock bit is like, I'm not conservative on everything. I'm not liberal on anything. If you make up your mind before you hear their argument, you're a fool.
It's not it's not like Will Smith is an actor or anything.
No. And I like, as I pointed out on that show afterwards, like there was one camera angle. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry, this is a corporation who has the means of zooming into a fucking getting right there on my fingertip, and yet they have one camera angle of the slap, and it's way far back. Stop, bro. Stop. Anyway, and they didn't cut from live. Isn't that interesting? Anyway.
No, the whole thing is,
it's on a 10-second delay, 2-minute delay.
No, they're trying to outlaw, like they're trying to take cancel culture and like basically outlawing humor. Like you can't even make a joke about anything. Like you hear people like our friend Tyler Fisher. We love you, Tyler.
Yeah, definitely.
JP Sears. A lot of these guys are blowing the lid off what's happening in the culture of comedy. Even Dave Chappelle, you got to give credit, even though like
my friend Mark Hughes up in Canada, you'll like him. He's filthy, filthy, but I love him to death, and he's fighting up against a lot of it. But yeah, and I saw Tyler. I met him once. He was a sweetheart. But I like the fact that there is not that stepping back from the idea that it's left and right, and especially the idea that I mean, I think that part of the reason what detached me from it is not just my rebellious nature, but also from the fact that, like, Trump didn't do what I wanted him to do with the pandemic. Trump did some smelly shit. And so from my standpoint is like, okay, thanks for what you did for us 2015 to 2020. Now who's next? Because what I'm in service of is truth. What I'm in service of is the people. What I'm in service of is small government. What I'm in service of, what I'm in service of is non-lizard, like we were talking about. That's really what I'm. And I know I say it flippantly and hyperbolically. I don't personally believe that you unzip a fucking human mask and they're lizard. But I'm just saying. Although we could talk about it, but I'm just saying, my allies, like you're talking about in the beginning of this freedom rally. My allies, I don't care what I don't care what you voted on a certain, I don't care as long as you're anti them, let's hang out, let's do stuff, let's make stuff happen, let's whatever.
Enemy of my enemy.
Yeah, and you definitely made that happen, and that was something I noticed as well at the Freedom Rally. You guys let some guy get up and talk about, he was a Black Lives Matter guy and started talking, I know a lot of y'all are racist, and like a lot of us in the crowd were like, okay, or whatever. But we didn't boo, get the fuck. Like, he's allowed to have, as long as he's here for freedom, as long as he's here for anti-lizard, we can disagree on certain things. And even BLM joined in Brooklyn, protesting Kyrie Irving not being allowed to play. Like that. This is supposed to be two different sides, but no. We're the same, because ultimately, I certainly believe, especially with I've had socialists on my show, I've had Proud Boys on my show, I've had all kinds of people. When you get us offline, we're more reasonable. Most people are actually quite reasonable.
First of all, in terms of just one thing to mention about BLM, when we showed up to Barclays Center, we don't need to point fingers to any one group or any individual, but it turned out the way it went down, there were some barricades that wound up being hopped over, and people coming right up to the door and saying a few words on the bullhorn, and a couple individuals kind of pushing back and forth with security guards. But of course, the next day in the New York Post, Daily News, whatever it was, anti-vaxxers storm Barclays Center. Let's not mention that BLM was there, part of it. Let's not implicate them as right. Let's not let anyone know that they're involved.
Especially because 2 years ago we were just supposed to listen to Black Lives Matter no matter what. We were supposed to treat them like they were almost more human. They were morally superior than all the rest of us evil non-black people.
They were also super immune to the COVIDs, as our friend Jeff Berwick says, back in summer of last year. Was it June when everyone was hitting the streets and the riots?
Oh, right.
They're super immune. Yeah. It's not a problem if they hit the streets.
No, right. They don't. So a Black Lives Matter rally is not a super spreader event, and neither is Obama's party on was it Martha's Vineyard? I think he had a bunch of people out. Remember? John Legend.
All of them were.
Yeah, they're all lizards.
Gavin Newsom at the French Laundry, all of them.
Yeah, dude. So all of these things happened, and for me, I was like, okay, this is smelly, and I was already activising them in my own way, but I'm like, okay, time to step it up, and joining the rally was really interesting. I probably went to only 5 over the course of the time I was the next 9 months or whatever before I moved to Austin, or 10 was. Yeah, anyway. And I always had a good experience. I always met great people. I always met people from all walks of life. Yes, there were people there sometimes. There was one where they seemed like some Proud Boyish type of whatever. But hey, if we're going to allow like Black Lives or allow, you have to understand, ultimately, I just think it's really advantageous for the lizards if we're fighting amongst ourselves. You know what I'm saying?
Lizards will be lizards.
Lizard, exactly.
They just want to pick up the crumbs, or I guess maybe that metaphor doesn't, because they're imagining themselves as superior and operating above as
Yes.
authority figures, and
Yes.
they're dropping crumbs off to us. So maybe we
Right.
should say dinosaurs. I don't know if those are even real.
Yeah,
Like what? No, like yeah, like however you want to identify these people who are really exhibiting, and and like we have to address the child trafficking. We have to address how they're just like deconstructing any sense of like family values and just like a wholesome life, a healthy lifestyle.
Right.
They're attacking us at every level, not just from the flesh.
Right.
At the spiritual level, they're it's, and you could talk about I always forget the guy's name, Bezmenov, who's about ideological subversion, and just like breaking down society, like the Western society from its core, from its spiritual core. I think at the end of the day, we're all human beings.
Right.
I think we all come from the same evolutionary line of whatever.
Right.
But it comes down to the spirit level and the soul, like how we connect. You could talk about the pineal gland. There's just a great video I was watching about how certain chemicals and compounds have a direct connection to the calcification of the pineal gland. And this is what we're witnessing, is that people have lost their capacity to use their God-given common sense, their intuition.
Right.
And that you can trace that right to the pineal gland. And this is like where we have a visceral connection to our soul.
I also think there's, and that definitely probably has merit as well. I also think that I think anything you practice, you get good at. And when you rep the muscle of self-righteousness, when you rep the muscle of punishing others for their ideas, when you rep that muscle, it's real hard to break that. Real hard. I have a loved one of mine who is, has been entrenched in that world of course I'm right. Of course this is the right way to go. And anyone who disagrees with me hates black people, hates women, but never mind, one tangent at a time, Pete. And the fact that they love me is a wrench in the works of that continuing on. Right. And obviously, and the fact that I can maneuver well and communicate well. I don't just say, yeah, you're anti-patriot or something. I'm not intellectually lazy enough to just label her or whatever. But the reality is that I'm a wrench in the works of self-righteousness, punishing others for their ideas, blah, blah, blah. And I'm watching the cognitive dissonance happen. And it's both freeing and sad to watch the inner fight in her head. It's sad to be like, I mean, just come on.
Yeah.
The water's warm. Jump in. Yes, you disagree with me on things. I'm not bad. You're not bad. It's them that's bad. Jump in the fucking water. It's warm. And I feel like New York, just like I left San Francisco a few years, or like right before the pandemic, San Francisco has been lost to that for a long time. And New York, I personally believe, is essentially being lost to that as we speak. Although maybe it might not be too late, but probably is. But suffice it to say, one of the solutions for me was to just take myself out of it. You were talking about like doing the best we can, get these people out, whatever. But number one, not be sold that that Zeldin or whatever, if he gets in, or Matlin or anybody. I mean, the guy, so I'm just using him as an example.
No, it's everybody.
That anybody is going to be our savior.
We love you, John.
We love you, John. John Matlin for Congress. But that anybody's going to be our savior or the one guy we can hang our hopes on or any of that stuff, because humans will human, lizards will lizard, and ultimately, if the system is broken, even though we put in a Band-Aid on top of it, that doesn't fix it. You know what I mean? I don't know. What are your thoughts on whether or not New York is lost?
Well, it depends on what you mean by New York. I just think about the people and about the heart and soul, and the vast majority of people who have come, again, I get overwhelmed just thinking about all the people I've had the chance to meet who represent the heart and soul, the classic New York tough, not taking any BS.
Right.
I think that you've seen a huge exodus of people to Florida and other places, but the people who are continuing to hold the line and just like figure it out and make it work, homeschooling their kids, or finding alternative ways to generate income. The challenge for me was reconciling my relationship with the Word and with the Bible and with what's foretold in the book of Revelation, and when it refers to Babylon, I think New York epitomizes what we understand as Babylon,
Right.
more than any place on earth. You could talk about London, Washington D.C.,
L.A.
So, it's like, if you're a true believer in the Bible, then it reaches a point where you understand this as inevitable, and that it's just like the flood with Noah, but we're like, this is more the harvest, and that what we're seeing now with like what they're trying to do to the kids, and it's really horrifying to the point where like you reach a point. And I was going to say this earlier. The challenge for us is to come to terms with the fact that we can't save everybody, we can't change everybody's mind, we can't convince everybody that what's happening is happening, and that that we have their best interests that we're trying to protect people's health and protect the sanctity of life. At like you were saying, at a certain point, like people have reached a point, however it was, people reached a point where they're willfully surrendering,
Right.
they're willfully surrendering their free will and their sense of like self-responsibility, and they're deferring it to authority figures, whether it's on the TV screen or from their public officials, health experts. I think this is a product of putting your faith in man over God. Okay?
Yeah.
And this is and the comparison to San Francisco is interesting because, again, I'm talking about the pineal gland and what they've been putting in the water, and just the air pollution in New York and whatever else is, and just the culture and the corporatization, where New York is the epicenter of the corporate fascist regime that's
Right.
been, that's taken over since whenever, 1933. But San Francisco is the home base for this whole military operation to attack from like the drug, the research that was happening since the 50s, MK Ultra, LSD, all the all the psychedelic drugs that I myself, we both come from a musical background.
Yeah.
You look at certain chemical stimuli as a way to channel the higher realm and like express it through music or poetry, and to we so many of us in the US glorify the 60s and the summer of love and all the great music that we grew up on. But at the same time, this is exactly what has led to the demasculization, and just like so many of our, I think Ram Dass is an example of someone who was like a premier academic mind who went the spiritual guru route, and then he just lost it. Maybe that's not the best example, but there's so many examples And we're seeing, and it's become even worse now that we're seeing basically the crack epidemic
Right.
2.0,
Right.
and now there's fentanyl and all these other drugs. This has been happening in San Francisco for over half a century,
Right. And the thing about
and now
that
it's hitting New York and other cities.
Right. And that maybe I don't know whether it's chicken or egg or whatever, but I think part of the other thing, and I was talking about We Outside. I had those sweethearts on my show. They were not in this apartment, but in New York, and we recorded. And I was talking about the death of New York and the death of San Francisco. And in my personal standpoint, because I spent a lot of time there and I watched that it decline. It's the demasculinization, but it's also done from, the worst part is that it's done from a place of thinking that they have good intentions, right? So a bully, like a straight up bully, middle school bully, will come up and push you. The bully at school doesn't think he has good intentions, right? Because he's being mean. The San Francisco, New York, higher up elite creep ball, okay, the tech nerd, the weirdo behind usually white, sorry, but it is what it is.
Parent?
The helicopter, the person you're not allowed to say this on Facebook, I'm gonna censor you. That type of bully not only is faceless, so they face no accountability, but also they think they have good intentions, and it's real hard to stop that, because when you're facing a bully at school, one punch and now it gets harder to bully you. When you're facing one of these people, not only can you not punch them because there is no accountability, but also they believe they're fighting the good fight by censoring us. They're fighting the good fight by mandating a chemical, right? They're fighting the good fight by cutting off kids' genitalia.
Well, I think that this conversation is where you got to give Joe Rose all the credit to just hit the nail on the head every step of the way when you talk about narcissistic relationships and about people abusing you psychologically. It's not just about physical abuse now.
Right.
It's
Go follow Joe Said It First.
Joe said it first. This is about people like dominating you psychologically, and it's a more subversive way to control someone than just like dominating them physically. Right. I think that experience from a young developing age, when you tell a child that they can't handle their own business, it's hitting back is one thing, but another thing is shutting down the bully with your words, right? And if a bully is trying to attack your identity or your and it plays into all the identity politics, the gender, the race,
sure.
Dogma they're trying to normalize, is that you can't just stand up for yourself. You need mommy and daddy to come and coddle you and just like make yourself comfortable and normalize your insecurity and your weakness and your failure to stand up for yourself.
Infantilization.
And this is what gets carried into adulthood,
right.
And it prevents grown adults from having the capacity to stand up for themselves when they're being violated.
Right. And that's what I see happen in San Francisco, is that, essentially physically, energetically weak tech nerds came in who don't have the practice of standing up for themselves or speaking their voice or being truthful. And then, but they make a lot of money. And so they can afford, just like no one else in San Francisco, just like no one else in the upper, just like, right? And so the real ones got priced out and the weak ones came in, whatever you say, dear, blah, blah, blah. And then angry women. And so it's angry women and energetically weak men. And they sit and not only that, but San Francisco is one of the whitest places in the world.
Oh yeah, and it's the epitome of the same privilege that they're accusing the bad people of exhibiting. They epitomize what they call white privilege.
Right.
But it's being exercised now by people across across all races, ethnic backgrounds.
Right.
It's this this mentality of I can do whatever I want, and anyone who speaks against me just needs to be,
Right.
Needs to be canceled,
Right.
just to make me feel comfortable.
Right. It's just exactly like what you're saying about the infantilization, and like I keep messing up that word, but like that's what's so frustrating, obviously from an outsider's perspective. But that's what I see happening again, repeating itself in New York, where it may not be tech, but it's other type of elite, quote unquote, financially well off, comfortable, weird, and most of them are not from New York. And again, I'm a transplant too. I'm not saying this from any place of like I grew up in the Bronx, blah blah blah. Although I was born in Long Island, but I'm seeing it as the same thing is that Connecticut. White ladies moved in young, whatever. They wanted to go to NYU acting school. Daddy, can I have some money to go to? Okay, go ahead, princess. Blah blah blah. And now they grew up in nice, comfortable life. And now they get to New York, and rather than assimilating, rather than whatever, they want to make everybody else be nice and comfortable. I want a big daddy government to replace the big white daddy I had in Connecticut.
Yeah.
Right? You know what I'm saying? And so they abuse, and then it's just but money, and they're the only ones who can afford there. And Staten Island motherfuckers get priced out. Brooklyn get priced out. Queens get priced out. And it's not New York anymore. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, these are exactly the places that were the most egregious and shameless with the implementation of the segregation, the fascism, the groupthink, and the body police. About or I don't even know what else to call it. Just like I
like that.
You gotta cover your nose. You gotta show your papers. You gotta take this test. But it's still hard to even begin to deconstruct how we got to this point where people are still enforcing this in certain places because the mayor, the city administration has convinced people that you have the legal, you have a legal out to discriminate against people.
Mm-hmm. We only want people who work for us who fall in lockstep. We are better, right? That's essentially what I mean. Like you're saying, Hochul and Newsom, we're better, and San Francisconites as well. We're better than the flyover states. Even though, by the way, like I said, San Francisco white as hell. When I flew to Austin, I was talking to somebody, I've told this story, but like some lady on the Upper West Side, white lady, I tell her that I was moving to Austin, and she's like, "Oh, you'll be surrounded by such bigotry." And I'm thinking to myself, like, what the fuck? Number one, you've never been to Texas,
yeah,
so
at this
shut
point,
the fuck up.
At this point, Austin's like as liberal as
No, it is. But there's more black people here than there are on the Upper West Side. I'm sorry. I drive out to. I'm living in the country. I go to Oklahoma City. I see little black kids running around with little pink-haired white kids. Like this is normal life. They think because they've never been here, just like anybody. If you don't have access to their experience and to real life there, you put them in a mental box. Either they're above you, they're below you, they're stupid, they're separate, they don't know any better, they're ignorant. But the people in those elites are the most ignorant people I've ever met. They are the most in the box, where even somebody black or somebody this or somebody, Texas people, they're reasonable. Even if they disagree with you. I know Austin, whatever. But like, they're reasonable. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, and they're doing the same thing at the national level that they did at the local level. They're just pitting people against each other and taking away any space or any capacity for people to hear each other out and like really sit down and see where each other is at, because there's a lot more common ground. But they're weaponizing things like the shot and abortion, and they're gaslight and like the timing of the Roe v. Wade decision was so deliberate and so it happened precisely at the if I'm not mistaken, it was right around the time that they're rolling back all the mandates. Mm-hmm. Not all, obviously we're still dealing with some in New York, but right at the time that the narrative is crumbling, they bring in something else to pit people against each other, and they're there's going to be the next thing after that, and people are just going to keep falling into it. And listen, like all of us are guilty at some point to call out the hypocrisy. Oh, you say my body, my choice for this and not that, but I mean, yeah, that's a whole nother conversation. Right. But it's interesting. We have you think this guy Beto stands a chance?
No.
Yeah.
Unless you
see a lot of these Beto signs in
Austin.
Town.
Yeah. Number one, it's always white people. Okay, so let's be real. Let's be real. I'm not saying that white people are the devil. I'm just saying let's be real. I'm just saying, are there the people who say Beto is standing up for people of color? People of color don't like Beto, so who are you standing up for, you fucking white creeps? Sorry.
I'm very offended. I'm feeling very fragile right now. I need a safe space, ladies and gentlemen.
Don't worry, I'm a half white. But I just think like my biggest frustration is just not calling what it is. Like is the banana in the tailpipe? You know what I mean? Is pissing on my shoulder and calling it rain. Like, just be frank with me. If they had at least said, hey, you know what? This is a way for us to punish what we believe to be Trump supporters. Mandate. Like, then all right, I kind of respected it more. I was like, okay, so at least you're full on Hitler and you know it. That's good. And you're being open about it. You know what I mean? Not, subversive, like, I'm your hero. And that's why, that's what I was going to say. I will reiterate it. Because I had the wonderful, Maggie.
Yeah. I think we met him.
Actually, her.
That's right. No, she's with Gays Against Groomers?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's...
My bad. I'm confusing her with this other guy who goes MAGA Pitt. We met in L.A. Never mind.
Yeah. Maggie, and I had the owner, I'm forgetting her name, of the comic strip.
Right.
On the show 9 months ago or whatever.
Wait, you had Gene?
Yeah.
I got to go back and see that. We love Gene. We love you, Gene.
Why aren't people following me? You better subscribe, racist. All right. But I had them on the show and I talked about the fact that, like, at that time, they were like, they even started to, like, if you're anti-mandate, you're white supremacist. And I was like, hang on. I actually Googled. It took me 2 minutes to Google it. That only at that point in February 15th of this year, only 40.5% of black Americans nationwide were fully vaccinated. So you're saying if I don't want 60% of black people to lose their job, I'm racist? That doesn't make any logical sense. If I don't want to kick 60% of black Americans out of restaurants, I'm racist. If I don't, that doesn't, you know what I'm saying? Like so
insanity. I don't know. Again, at a certain point, you have to, like, at a certain point, you're beating your head against the wall trying to convince these people. Like, you have to, we have to empower the community that we have and just, like, continue forging the relationships. And shout out to Public Square. Our friend Chrissy in Chicago is, one of the lead, they're putting out a great service. I think Alex Zek is also working on something to advertise and, like, make accessible all the places that never enforce this stuff. Beautiful. Whenever you go to New York,
I love that.
Download the Public Square app so you can support the places that never complied. There's dozens of them, if not hundreds. A lot of them who probably just did it without even being public about it because they didn't want to bring undue attention to themselves. But download Public Square, Public SQ, and you can find the places. They're in California, Chicago, all these places where it was mandated. You can support the places that never went along with it. Yeah.
And Gene from the comic strip is one of those.
Absolutely.
The comic strip is one of those places. Love that spot. And we'll start wrapping up, but I did want to ask also, have you heard of San Diego Rise Up?
Oh yeah, we love Melissa.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. They're doing amazing stuff over there. Anyway, but you have the overarching theme, the umbrella of, like, the goals that you have in your mind for what to do with New. So for those who don't know, New York Freedom Rally has, obviously, you had rallies, you did a bunch of activism, great stuff, made a huge network, and a home for people who were like, hey, I don't feel like this is right. I can at least follow someone who says I'm not crazy, right? So what do you feel is the next steps if you or maybe you have frustration about it?
I'm not at liberty. I'm not at liberty to disclose what we have cooking next.
We have a lizard terrarium on the way.
No, we're hoping to build more of a national network with people like Melissa. I mentioned Chrissy in Chicago. There, and just like putting out more resources for people to fight back from the legal standpoint, because we are very excited about a lot of the lawsuits that are underway, and there's going to be we're going to see more lawsuits now. That we're at this point where the CDC has already rolled back these guidelines, but they're still enforcing this stuff in hospitals. They're still enforcing this stuff for city workers. We're excited for our NYPD, our FDNY, to be going back to work. Teachers are still waiting. A lot of them have moved on with their lives and either moved or say like I just don't want to go back to work for this system, and rightfully so. But we want to encourage people to educate themselves about who they are, really, what our true relationship is to this, what we thought, what we hope is still a constitutional republic, but really, when you look into the fine print of what we're dealing with, is a private corporation that has no like.
They're not beholden.
They're not beholden to the Constitution at all. Right. And if that's the case, then we're not beholden to them. How about that? That's basically where that's basically the angle that we're trying to work with moving forward. Right. Is we can bring people out on the street all day long, and it was the most glorious time, and we're gonna with whatever comes next, whether it's issues with supply chain, food, energy, or if they're trying to roll out these digital currency and surveillance, social crediting,
war.
You got to give it up to God at a certain point, and take control of your own life and your own affairs, and build up your own community at the local level. And it's a long time coming for us to really just put all our energy into that. And people are always going to go out on the street and take it to Eric Adams' doorstep, or a state assemblyman if he's trying to pass a bill to take away parental rights. We're always going to continue to do that, but our energy is going to be on, putting out more resources for people to, to just take more control of their, at the end of the day, freedom requires a sense of responsibility and self-autonomy. The whole tagline about bodily autonomy is it's not just about our bodies or our children or our professional lives, the way we conduct commerce with our neighbors. It's all the above, and we have to put in the work to take control and eventually become truly independent from this system, and just let it's just going to have to crumble.
It's just going to have to eat
at
itself,
a certain
right?
point.
Yeah.
So on that note, I will shamelessly plug that we're trying to raise the funds to set up our private association. So we want to operate as a nonprofit to create more opportunities for parents to build up enrichment programs for these kids, do workshops on on gardening, food preservation, financial literacy, like lawful action committees. We want to file the notices and the affidavits to continue taking these people to court,
right?
And not just rely on some law firm to come and file a class action for it. Like we need to be able to step into a court and represent ourselves,
right?
And we might lose people along the way. This is kind of the point that it's gotten to, is that a lot of people who understand the issues we're looking at, they're complacent, or they're just not willing to put in the work to really take your education, your understanding of yourself to that level. And I would include myself in that. This is all like I'm still learning along the way and deepening my understanding. But yeah, I think New York is always going to be the greatest city on earth. It's a beacon for like culture and art and industry. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the people and the heart and the soul, and continuing to say, I'm not gonna take your bullshit.
Right. You cussed. Thank you.
I neglected to ask if we're allowed to do that.
Oh yeah, haven't you heard me say?
Fuck yeah.
Yeah, fuck yeah. Fucking Kathy Hochul. So all right.
Botox.
Yeah, she's the worst. And that chick. Oh. That's what I was gonna say before. Just to add a great or another thought to reiterate, because I talked about it when Gene was on the show. But the reality is this. Let's use the comic strip as an example. The reason why a lot of us and a lot of companies in these mandate areas complied is fear, right? Fear of what they're going to do if we don't do it, right? Fear of what that means. If, I'm going to get slapped with it. Right? The comic strips experience, and I know this isn't everybody's. There were some in and outs in California that got some fines, but from what I heard, they go to court and then it falls apart. So, but comic strip never faced any real consequences for not enforcing mandates.
Yeah, same thing with Rocco's.
Same thing with Rocco's. They had these health inspectors come. You're supposed to put up a sign, and so put up a sign. And then, you're supposed to, okay, thank you, we will. I mean, Gene even talked about it on the show when some health inspectors would come in and they literally ask her, she's a co-owner of the fucking place, hey, who's the owner? Oh, I'm sorry, I just work here for the day. Like, you don't owe these people anything. You're not doing anything illegal. That's the thing. They only were able to enforce these mandates because of cultural fear of what they're going to do. The moment you go, no, I'm not going to, it takes away the power. So everybody just needs to remember and take a step back from the emotions and the fear. I know that's easy to say because I don't have a business, in New York in September of 2021. But let's practice getting together with people who are in the same mindset, who have resources. Number one. And number two, that's so helpful because I'm not crazy, so I don't feel alone. Number three, let's look at what the actual consequences will be, and let's step back from the reaction. Let's step back from, they're doing it, so I have to do it. Sovereignty, okay? Independence, sovereignty, fuck fear. And,
Freedom over fear.
Freedom over fear. Where can people find you and support you?
I don't know if I mentioned the URL for the fundraisers, givesendgo.com/NYFR. The website it's also linked to NewYorkFreedomRally.org and all the social media NY Freedom Rally.
Awesome.
That's basically it.
And wherever you're listening, make sure you subscribe, make sure you share, make sure you rate and review. And find me on Instagram at Peter_Feliciano and on TikTok and on Twitter at Rule62Peter. And you can support my podcast and my music. And I do have a new cover song coming soon with an Austin musician. And you'll be able to find that on my YouTube. And you can support my music and my podcast at patreon.com/Conservatish. Bye, everybody. Thank you again.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you.